What makes a sequel good? When is a sequel necessary? When should a piece of entertainment not have a sequel? In the past decade, we've become used to seeing mainline entries in video games receive new releases almost yearly. There have been 12 Assassin's Creed entries since 2007. This year, we'll be on the 20th Call of Duty release. Many people are saying the changes in the Overwatch 2 multiplayer are unsubstantial, and many have been complaining about the lack of substance in all of these new releases for years, yet regardless of their reception, even if one doesn't sell as well as another, profit is always made. What makes a remaster good? When is a remaster called for? What are the intricacies that separate remasters from remakes? Why am I asking all of these questions? Well, these are the questions that the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe forces us to confront. It doesn't answer these questions for us, but it toys with them. Just like its predecessor, this game involves us acknowledging our perception of narratives and why we feel the ways we do about narrative structure. It also gives us laughs while doing it.
Ultra Deluxe? What does it even mean?
This video is not a review. I don't really feel like games like the Stanley Parable call for reviews, or even care about them. This video is just the meaning I've crafted from this experience. The Stanley Parable, the original one that was released in 2013, is a hard game to define. This is your one and only warning that if you haven't played the Stanley Parable and you enjoy subversive narratives or quote-unquote walking sim games, then you should definitely check it out. I would recommend purchasing the updated Ultra Deluxe version because you get all of the experiences from the first game and experience new content without having to buy two games. There's only a couple of minor differences between the base experience of the two. The Ultra Deluxe experience appears as nothing more than a remaster at first. You play through the game using Stanley as your avatar to experience the different endings. Like before, the game has no set rules for the narrative. The narrator's personality is drastically different depending on which decisions you make, and all of these factors are influenced by the different ending branches you travel down.
This was exactly the way, right now, that things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy. Stanley was fat and ugly and really stupid. He probably only got the job because of a family connection. That's how stupid he is. That or with drug money. Also, Stanley is addicted to drugs and hookers.
But after a couple of normal runs, the new content reveals itself in a charmingly blatant way. The contents of what's behind this new content door is a mystery to both you and the narrator. He shares enthusiasm about receiving an expansion to the Stanley Parable after all this time, but what you're both met with is a gimmicky mechanic that has no substance.
Stanley. All right, let's see, it's the jump circle?
This transitions into the narrator expressing his anger towards sequels and re-releases that add nothing of value to the original.
This is what happens when greedy video game developers with no respect for their fanbase rush a cheap expansion to market for no reason other than to make an easy dollar.
And then he takes you out of the narrative onto a journey into his hall of memories. It's a collection of moments and reviews from the original game, and you alongside the narrator get to bask and bathe in all the nostalgia. The moment is cut short by the discovery of all the stowed away negative reviews of the Stanley Parable the narrator has hoarded away from the nostalgia. Needless to say, upon seeing the negative reviews, the narrator doesn't take it very well.
Entertaining than entertaining. Unfunny! I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to make a serious work of art.
His response to the criticism is to cater to it, and he adds a skip dialogue button to his narrative-based game. The button ends up skipping past minutes, days, then years worth of dialogue, until all that's left is nothing. You've skipped past everything. So who was in the wrong here? The player for leaving the negative review that lacked substance, or the developer for caving in and adding a mechanic that lacked substance? It's what the people wanted, right? Well, they're both wrong. Of course, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but requesting a skip button for dialogue in a game that's entirely held up by dialogue is a clearly unthoughtful request. Catering to that request is equally unthoughtful, but there's a point to this that you'll see later. That skip button ending ends with you in a desert of nothingness and the game restarting. Things begin to pick up when you revisit the new content door and find it modified by the narrator. He's gone ahead and compiled new content for his version of the Stanley Parable sequel, and he starts hyping it up immensely. What follows is a tour through a modern-esque museum that shows off aspects of features that will be in the game. It feels similar to walking through a digital version of a Kickstarter campaign, and the narrator's statements back that up.
Now, to be clear, I haven't quite nailed down what exactly the Stanley Parable 2 is going to be, but let's take a look at some of the features I've been developing for it.
So you're shown the new features one by one. A button that says gym, the jump circle again, new collectibles, a not-so-infinite hole, and the bucket.
And to be honest, it's a much more convenient solution for me than actually redesigning the game to be less uncomfortable. Can you imagine what a pain in the ass that would be?
When you pick up the bucket, it will stay with you until you reach an ending, including this one. After seeing everything the narrator has to offer, he attempts to combine all of his ideas into a sequel, only to find it creates nothing of substance.
Who am I kidding, Stanley? This isn't a coherent video game at all, it's a lot of gags. And I do very much enjoy creating gags, but they don't add up to anything.
What he instead decides to do is inject them into the already existing game in a quote-unquote tasteful way. What we're left with is the base game with different items scattered all over the place, and it plays normally until you find all of the newly added collectibles, which gives you the closest to an ending you'll get in this game, and an epilogue in the main menu. What you'll notice is that you're now playing the original game with just a bunch of gags added to it, but there's something notable about the bucket. If you grab the bucket before beginning an ending path, you'll receive unique dialogue and a modified ending pertaining to the bucket.
Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left.
Mostly everything else about the ending you choose stays the same. This turns out to be the bulk of the new content for this game, and as you'll ironically realize, there's no question about it, these bucket endings lack substance. Because every time you grab the bucket, you now factually know that the ending you're about to get pertains to the bucket. This is what the majority of negative reviews pertaining to the new game talk about, and most of them read the same, like so. If you've never played this game, it's worth it. However, the new content added is minimal. It mostly amounts to new endings surrounding the bucket. It lacks substance. How disappointing, right? They promised all of these new endings on the Steam page, but as it turns out, they mean almost nothing. I don't think it's a coincidence that the bucket is a representation of most of the new content, and it's filled with nothing. But it's not. Not really. Because the truth is, there's an insane amount of new dialogue pertaining to the bucket, and some of the new modified endings are really high effort. They didn't just throw in new dialogue, they've added animations, new unexpected spectacles, new rooms, and new experiences. So I ask again, who was in the wrong here? The players for leaving the negative reviews about the lack of substance, or the developers for adding a mechanic that lacked substance? Well, neither of them are wrong. The developers have technically delivered on what they promised on the Steam page. What we're left with is a meta-commentary on the malpractices of false advertising and barely noticeable changes to new releases in gaming. But at the same time, in my opinion, a substantial experience. They wanted to give you that feeling of being scammed without actually scamming you. This was all clear to me in the epilogue ending, which takes place after the skip button ending from earlier. The game technically never restarted in this timeline. You encounter the old museum of nostalgia that you can bring the bucket to if you figure out how to do so, and discover that the narrator's changes to the game amounted to nothing. The sequel still received negative reviews. Not only that, but it's even suggested that just by the sequel existing, the original has been tarnished. What a sad outcome for the narrator. He couldn't win either way. I think there's a lot that can be gleaned and interpreted from this game to make you think about the differing perspectives of sequels to both artists and critics. At the end of the day, it's really up to you what you decide is substantial and what isn't. Will you indulge in the game and find the dialogue surrounding the bucket hilarious? Will you be absorbed into the insanity and make a new sequel to the Stanley Parable every time you boot up the game? Or will you reject it, Deciding sanctity and originality triumphs over quantity, and vote with your wallet by never opening it up in the first place. Once again, the Stanley Parable leaves us with a choice, an aspect that's integral to how the game works. Only this choice in particular can be made without even booting up the game. When it comes to new releases, just do your own research. Note that gameplay footage always triumphs over marketing footage, and then make your choice. Thank you for watching.